Welcome to the HEOR Insights YouTube channel.
In this explainer, we will deconstruct the PICO framework. This is a foundational tool for structuring research in health economics and outcomes research. Its correct application isn't just an administrative task. It's a strategic necessity that really dictates the success of an entire evidence generation plan.
So, what does the PICO framework actually do? It translates a complex clinical or economic problem into a very structured, answerable research question. This structure is absolutely essential for health technology assessment bodies, or HTAs, because it provides the exact clarity they need to evaluate new technologies.
Now, a poorly defined PICO is not a minor error. It leads to critical failures across the entire evidence generation lifecycle. These failures can jeopardize market access and, frankly, can render years of clinical development commercially valueless in a specific market.
Next, we will examine each component of the PICO framework from a specific health economics and outcomes research perspective. Understanding these nuances is critical for any professional working in this field.
For the P, which is population, granularity is key. It's just not enough to say cancer. You have to specify the subtype, any genetic markers, and crucially, the line of therapy. A mismatch between the trial population and the intended reimbursement population, especially on the line of therapy, is a very common reason for HTA rejection.
The I for intervention must detail the technology being evaluated with absolute precision. Specifics like dosage and frequency become direct inputs for acquisition costs in economic models. The route of administration is also a key factor. For instance, an intravenous drug incurs administration costs like nurse and facility time that an oral drug simply does not.
The C for comparator is often the most contentious part of a PICO in HEOR. While a placebo might be sufficient for regulatory approval, payers and HTA bodies demand a comparison against the current, active standard of care used in their specific country. They need to understand how your intervention performs against what they are currently using and paying for.
For O, or outcome in HEOR, we have to think beyond the traditional clinical efficacy endpoints used in trials. A comprehensive value assessment has to include economic outcomes, like costs, and humanistic outcomes, like a patient's quality of life. The ECHO model gives us a framework for structuring these different types of outcomes.
The ECHO model stands for Economic, Clinical, and Humanistic Outcomes, and it provides a really comprehensive framework. It ensures an assessment captures a technology's full impact, from direct medical costs to survival benefits and even patient-reported quality of life. This is essential for calculating quality-adjusted life years, or QALYs, a measure that combines both the quantity and the quality of life.
You'll often see the framework extended to PICOs in HEOR. The T for timing is critical for economic models, which often need a lifetime horizon that's far beyond a typical clinical trial's duration. The S for setting, such as inpatient versus outpatient, directly impacts the cost inputs and, of course, the overall results of a cost-effectiveness analysis.
To make this more concrete, we'll now look at how these components are assembled in practice. The following two examples really illustrate the level of specificity required for HEOR evidence generation.
In this first example for oncology, notice the specificity of the population: metastatic, EGFR mutation-positive patients who have already progressed on prior therapy. This detail ensures the evidence is directly relevant. The comparator is the active standard of care, and the outcomes cover the full ECHO model: clinical, economic, and humanistic measures, all looked at over a lifetime horizon. This gives a complete picture of value.
Now for this medical device example in diabetes. Here, the population is defined by poor glycemic control. What's interesting is that the comparator isn't another drug, it's the standard practice of self-monitoring. The outcomes then include a mix of clinical control, measured by HbA1c, and humanistic value, measured by patient satisfaction.
Precision in PICO construction is vital. We will now review 3 common and costly mistakes that can undermine an entire HTA submission.
The first major pitfall is choosing a straw man comparator. This is when an outdated or clearly inferior treatment is used to make a new intervention look better than it is. HTA bodies like NICE in the UK or IQWIG in Germany are experts at identifying this flaw, and they will reject submissions that don't use the relevant local standard of care.
The second pitfall to watch out for is population drift.
This happens when the clinical trial population, which is often younger and has fewer comorbidities, doesn't match the real-world patients who will actually get the treatment. This compromises the study's external validity, which means the results might not be generalizable to the population a payer actually covers.
The third pitfall is relying too heavily on surrogate endpoints. For example, using blood pressure reduction as an outcome instead of the hard clinical endpoint, which would be stroke prevention. Payers reimburse for meaningful health outcomes, like preventing strokes, not just for changes in biomarkers, unless that link is strongly validated and accepted by HTA bodies.
To conclude, let's synthesize the primary distinction between a PICO framework developed for a clinical trial versus one that's designed for HEOR and market access.
Here is the crucial takeaway. It's all about a shift in focus. Clinical research often uses a placebo comparator to prove efficacy for regulatory approval. HEOR, on the other hand, uses an active standard of care comparator to prove added value for payers. The population has to reflect the payer's members, and the outcomes must include costs and quality of life over a much longer-term horizon.
This quote really highlights the immense strategic and financial importance of getting the PICO right. You can think of it as the architectural blueprint for all the evidence generation that follows. An error at this foundational step will have severe consequences for a product's access to the market.
The PICO framework is the essential tool to make sure your research answers the right questions for the right audience. You have to use it methodically to build a body of evidence that clearly demonstrates value, meets the needs of decision makers, and ultimately secures market access. If you get it right, you lay the foundation